The girl went on her first blind date with a rich, second-generation heir, and shockingly, she ordered him a heavy-tasting dish of raw pork intestine sashimi, thinking this would gross him out and ruin the meeting. But to her surprise, he paired it with beer and ate it happily, making her freeze in disbelief, because Mingxi was not here for her own date at all, but was standing in for her runaway best friend, determined to ruin the match. Yet she didn't know the heir had already met her earlier, when, on the way to the date, a car accident happened, and just as the rich heir was about to step forward to help, Mingxi, who was a nurse, rushed in first, tearing off her scarf to wrap the victim's wound, and that moment left a deep impression on him. Though he still had to go on the blind date his father had strictly ordered, and even after arriving at the cafe, his mind was still replaying the image of Mingxi saving someone, regretting he hadn't spoken to her earlier, and then, just as he thought this, the very same girl sat down in front of him, and he was stunned to realize that the girl who stole his heart at first sight was also his blind date, instantly making him feel like the happiest man alive. But Mingxi, seeing her first trick fail, dragged him to a filthy restaurant where the dishes were unwashed, cockroaches crawled on the tables, and even the waiter dipped his hands directly into the soup, making the gentleman heir frown, which delighted Mingxi as she thought she had finally disgusted him. But just as she felt triumphant, he started eating heartily without a trace of arrogance, which suddenly made her feel a pang of pity for this cheerful boy. And when that plan also failed, she had no choice but to try her friend's last trick, pretending to be greedy and gold-digging, so she arrogantly turned to leave, forcing him to follow, unaware that he had already noticed her ill-fitting heels. And once they reached a luxury store, she clumsily acted like she had forgotten her wallet, then, in a coy tone, asked him to pay, and the silly but kind heir immediately agreed. But since he still didn't show annoyance, she pushed further and randomly picked up a handbag, only to be shocked at the sky-high price, 3 months of salary for such a thing. And when the clerk urged her to try it on, she awkwardly lied that she already had one at home, and even stumbled clumsily on her heels, making him burst into laughter. And finally, she picked the cheapest passport holder, declaring all her plans failed, then got into a taxi to say goodbye. But to her surprise, the heir jumped in too, insisting on sending her home safely. So, with no choice, she nervously led him to her best friend Julian's house, and before parting, he gave her a gift, saying she would surely use it next time, and asked for another meeting. But just then she noticed Julian's brother returning, and to avoid being exposed for impersonating her friend, she hurriedly sent the heir away. Yet seeing Mingxi chatting with another handsome man, his jealousy instantly boiled over, and when she finally saw her friend, Mingxi complained that this heir was no ordinary rich boy because he always ruined her sabotage plans. And when Julian opened the gift, it turned out to be a pair of little leather shoes that, when Mingxi tried them on, fit perfectly, making her secretly emotional. But once home, she carefully hid the shoes away, knowing she was unworthy of such a bright and sunny boy, and locked away all her fantasies. Yet the next day, fate made them meet again on the street, and as Mingxi showed no reaction, the heir rushed across the road to chase her, not knowing her real name wasn't Julian at all. And as she was busy searching for change, she didn't see a motorcycle speeding toward her, but luckily the heir grabbed her tightly into his arms, leaving her breathless. And as she looked up at the dazzling figure, she realized it was Huang Sitai, and flustered, she suspected he was stalking her, but he smiled and said he was just coincidentally taking the bus. And when he saw her plain, simple clothes compared to their first meeting, he felt unexpectedly happy to see her true self. And when she admitted she had no bus coins, he pulled out a whole handful, purposely creating an excuse to see her again. And when he asked her about their next meeting time, she panicked and rushed onto the bus. But he of course followed, making her embarrassed under everyone's stares, and even the conductor jokingly helped him. And as he pressed her again about when and where to meet, the whole bus grew awkward, and Mingxi, flustered, just nodded with a shy smile, which made him so excited he apologized to everyone before leaving, while she only wished the ground would swallow her whole. And soon the day of their arranged date came, and he took her to a Western restaurant. But Mingxi, who came from hardship, had never used Western utensils before, and faced with the confusing array of forks and knives, she froze in fear of revealing herself, until the observant heir quickly called the waiter and asked which to use, cleverly saving her from embarrassment and protecting her pride. But just then, Mingxi spotted her hospital colleagues and quickly lifted the menu to hide her face, pretending to order, and only when they were seated did she lower it, never expecting to hear them gossiping about her, with a male colleague mocking her as a gold digger desperate to marry rich because earlier that morning she had carefully dressed up for this date, and it had become a joke among them, which made another male colleague jealous and upset. And not long after that, she even bumped into the medical rep during work hours. She was chatting happily, completely unaware that the man she spoke with was actually her best friend's older brother. And because of that, her colleagues assumed Minxie was a shallow gold digger who only wanted to marry into wealth, which made her heart sting with bitterness. But just then, Zitai, noticing her distress, elegantly lifted a glass of water and poured it over the gossiping man's head, leaving him embarrassed as he realized Minxie had overheard everything, and Zitai shielded her from his gaze, tossing down money for cleaning and telling him to wash his dirty mouth, while Minxie quickly fled but twisted her ankle on the steps. And though she insisted she could walk, Zitai ignored her stubbornness and scooped her up in a princess carry, and since she didn't dare go to the hospital for fear of exposure, they treated the injury by the roadside, where he gently applied medicine as cherry blossoms swirled in the air, making her heart stir with emotions. And she couldn't help asking if he only agreed to this blind date because of her wealthy family background. But his words reassured her completely, showing he cared only for her true self, not her background. Yet soon the little act between her and Julien was exposed. For when Sitai visited Julien's home, he was shocked to find two fiancés standing before him. And though he quickly understood he had been tricked, he went along with the play, realizing Julien had made her best friend take her place to escape a forced marriage, and the thought of the bond he had already formed with Mingxi made her feel so ashamed she wanted to run. But Julien's brother insisted she stay for dinner, and while others asked about Jitai's relationship with Julien, he brushed it off with jokes, though deep inside he was far more affected by the hand Julien's brother placed on Mingxi's shoulder, even deliberately shaking hands with him to mask his jealousy. And later, when he and Julien pretended to be a couple in the courtyard, Julien bluntly told him that Mingxi had no feelings for him and that the whole setup was only to reject him. But he didn't care, and when he flipped through a photo album and saw Mingxi's picture, his fingers traced her outline as his smile betrayed his heart. And when no one was around, he finally approached Mingxi, only for Julien's brother to quietly appear, noticing from afar that Zitai seemed to be holding her hand, while Mingxi herself, finally letting her guard down, clutched the note Zitai had given her. And that night, she went to the tea house at the address written there, where he apologized for the deception, revealing he had known the truth all along but kept quiet just to keep seeing her. And she confessed she wasn't a rich heiress at all, but just an overworked ER nurse from a poor family, which shocked him with its honesty. Yet he assured her he didn't want her to feel inferior, believing her heart did truly like him. And the next day, he sought Julien, who was leading a student protest, hoping she would tell her family she wouldn't marry him. And there he learned she had joined the revolution, perhaps the real reason she ran from the engagement. But just then, she fainted with a mild concussion, and he rushed her to the hospital, where the two began blaming each other, bickering nonstop, while Mingxi watched from a distance, jealousy and sorrow twisting inside her, knowing that a prince belonged with a princess, and that she, as a poor Cinderella, would only drag him down, her mood sinking completely. So when Jitai waited happily after her shift, inviting her to dinner, she coldly confessed that she had only gone on the date in her friend's place to earn money for a plane ticket abroad, freezing him like ice. And though he pleaded he could wait for her return, she gave him no chance, deciding that breaking things off was best. And though her heart shattered, she bravely said goodbye while he stood broken as cherry blossoms fell, remembering her promise to meet again before the petals vanished and to sing for her. Yet now the flowers still bloomed and the song unsung. Their love had died at its peak, and he strummed his guitar in anguish, not wanting to let go, but trapped in a hopeless love, asking his friend for advice, who told him it was better to stop now than to waste a lifetime longing. But the words only deepened his pain, and soon Julien's family's new pharmaceutical company held its grand opening, where Sitai arrived with his father to give gifts, and Mingxi too came to congratulate, and his father noticed immediately how his son's eyes never left her, his expression meaningful. And to ease the tension, Mingxi busied herself serving coffee, leading some guests to mistake her for a waitress, even ordering her rudely to add less sugar. And hearing them gossip about Zitai behind his back, she spitefully dumped in several spoonfuls. And when Zitai saw her being harassed, he wanted to defend her but was held back, yet he realized he could not keep living in this lie, for it would make her even more uncomfortable. So he asked Julien to end the pretense, declaring she was no longer his fiancée, and deciding to devote himself entirely to Mingxi, he went to her rented house, using the excuse of tutoring the landlord's daughter just to see her, and even pretended to drink too much to stay the night. And while she slept, he strummed his guitar in the courtyard, the gentle strings floating into her dreams, until she woke in the middle of the night and followed the sound. And there she found him bathed in moonlight, holding his guitar, fulfilling the promise she had once made to write him a song. That night, under the soft chords of the guitar, Mingxi whispered that things would get better, promising she would give him her answer by the last day of May. And though the May night was filled with messy singing, she joked that even the little bugs around would help. And when he echoed her with a gentle hum, her heart trembled with every vibration of his strings, though she forced herself not to show her growing affection, because ever since meeting him, her dull gray life had been filled with color, and in her memories she always saw herself smiling around him. And though she said she would give him her answer later, that did not shake his love at all. So when he learned she had a day off the next morning, he was thrilled, eager to take her out on a date. But before they could meet, her mother called asking her to take her younger brother out. And in an instant, their romantic date turned into a group outing with kids, leaving Shitai frustrated, especially when the two mischievous boys asked bold questions over noodles and sweet and sour pork, shocking him at their maturity, and under Mingxi's gaze, he could only explain they were just friends. Then later they went to the amusement park, where she happily rode the carousel while he stood aside carrying bags with a lifeless look, sighing at how his longed-for private time had been ruined. While at the same time, Julien was arrested for protecting her senior, interrogated by none other than her future princess-in-law. And when Shitai's father warned her to stop joining the revolution and to quickly marry his son, the rebellious Julien splashed hot soup all over him. But instead of retaliating, he only endured her insult and pressed forward with the engagement. And when her father realized it was too late to cancel, he angrily told her that since their family business had already accepted the Zitai family's help, breaking it off now would only bring ruin, leaving Julien torn between family duty and her own choices. And meanwhile, after sending Mingxi home that night, Shitai's heart raced wildly, excited for tomorrow, not knowing his father had already begun investigating her background, unwilling to let his son be tied to a poor Cinderella. And as Julien begged Zitai to act intimate in front of their parents, she was shocked when he firmly refused. And desperate, she ran to Mingxi for help. So when he showed up with flowers the next night, hoping for her reply to his confession, her answer shattered him, because Mingxi, unable to let her friend's family be destroyed, asked him to agree to the engagement, and his love instantly froze into despair. And the next day, he learned through her landlord that she had gone to get a passport with Julien's brother, making him furious, convinced by instinct that the man also liked her. And when he confronted Mingxi about why she didn't ask him to go, all his bottled-up feelings exploded, leading to a fierce quarrel as he demanded to know why she would rather play the good friend and push him to Julien than hold on to her own love. And though their time together was already limited with her leaving for good in June, she kept rejecting him. And heartbroken, he felt like he had always been chasing her alone until he was too exhausted to go on. And at their next meeting during the engagement banquet between him and Julien, Mingxi forced herself to say nothing as she watched him in a suit, her heart breaking. And when the banquet ended and she stumbled into him again, he saw the shoes she wore, the same pair he had once gifted her, and suddenly his heart softened. And for the first time, she confessed her true feelings, making his eyes fill with tears. And though her words came late, he didn't care. He just wanted to hold her hand and escape together, which they did, running away from the engagement in joy, unaware of the storm approaching, exchanging tokens, earphones from him, his tie from her, as they spent precious days dating like any ordinary couple, shopping at record stores, buying bread, and even drinking milk together, with him jokingly begging her to feed him bites until she, blushing, stuffed food into his mouth to quiet him. And in the bookstore, she felt deeply happy knowing he was right beside her, and they wrote down wishes to complete before she went abroad. But though her heart filled with warmth, sorrow lingered as she knew their love had no future. And after an evening out, when he sent her home, she comforted him with a gentle kiss, not knowing danger crept closer. And after they parted, Mingxi was suddenly ambushed, dragged away under a sack by strangers, and the next day, Shitai discovered her disappearance, panicked when even her strict work ethic broke as she failed to show up at the hospital, and though she rushed to the police, they refused to open a case because too little time had passed. So remembering Mingxi had said she might visit her hometown, Shitai decided to search there herself. Shitai decided to try his luck, and on the way, happened to meet a lost old man, kindly escorting him home only to discover it was actually Mingxi's hometown. And when he introduced himself as her boyfriend, her parents, overjoyed, warmly invited him to dinner. But even after the meal, Mingxi had not returned. So, with worry in his heart, he left, only to bump into a haggard Mingxi on the road who was cold and distant because the night before she had been abducted by none other than Sitai's father, a man with influence in both the underworld and the government, who showed her photos of her dates with his son and threatened her to stay away, even suspending her plans to go abroad, warning that if she didn't leave Sitai, this was only the beginning and not the end. And when Sitai later found her again, he finally learned the cruel truth, rushing home to confront his father, kneeling desperately for mercy, but being met with cold indifference because his father cared only about whether his son's marriage could bring him power and profit, not about his feelings. And though the boy begged, the father prepared to return to Singapore, declaring that unless summoned, his son must not follow. And Jitai, shattered, told Mingxi that the few weeks spent with her were the happiest moments of his life, while she only begged him to be careful and not ruin things. And so he left for Seoul with Julien as ordered. But seeing him in despair every day, Julien finally urged him to return to Gwangju to find Mingxi, explaining that Mingxi had left not out of fear for her own ruin, but because she didn't want to drag him into darkness. And when they met again, Mingxi told him directly that if they stayed together, both of their lives would be destroyed, asking him not to cling when they crossed paths again. Yet after Shitai left, Mingxi too lived in dazed sorrow, breaking down whenever his name was mentioned, though she forced herself to bury her feelings. Until one day fate brought them face to face once more, and this time Zitai had made up his mind, and against all odds they finally chose each other, deciding to elope. But along the way, they were mistaken for protesting students by Korean soldiers who were arresting demonstrators. And as the soldiers rushed them, Zitai stepped forward to protect her, only to be grabbed brutally by the throat, forcing Mingxi to strike back. And later, fearing he had a concussion, she rushed him to the hospital, delaying their escape. And while they hid there, the city outside fell into chaos, with soldiers injuring citizens under the excuse of maintaining order, filling the hospital with the wounded. And though Zitai worried every day they lingered added danger, Mingxi refused to abandon her duty, donning her nurse's uniform to treat victims. And eventually Zitai, as a medical student, also put on a white coat to help. But one night, while he accompanied doctors outside, a car rammed into them. And when he awoke, he was bound and battered in a secret room at home, his cold father watching with disdain, punishing him for trying to elope. While Mingxi, hearing he had been hit and dragged away, was filled with regret and helplessness. And meanwhile, her father, fearing for his children in the Gwangju turmoil, tried to take his son to safety. But they encountered soldiers and hid in the grass, until finally the father sacrificed himself to distract them. While elsewhere, Zitai's half-brother Zhengtai discovered his brother's captivity and begged his mother to act, and tired of her cruel husband, she divorced him and freed Zitai, who staggered back bloodied and broken to find Mingxi. And when she finally touched him again, she wept, realizing her love had returned. So they resolved to marry at once, exchanging vows in a quiet church, but happiness was short. For soon Mingxi received news that her father, protecting his son, had perished. And in his belongings, she found the savings she had sent home for school untouched, kept safe by him, and at the same time, Zitai's father, enraged that they reunited, ordered his men to eliminate Mingxi, overheard by Zheng Tai, who remembered how Mingxi had once been kind to him and took him to play at the amusement park. So, feeling uneasy, he ran to warn her, and that was when a soldier handed Mingxi a note, claiming Zitai had called her to meet him. But when Zitai returned, she was already gone, and his heart sank with dread. For at the meeting place, Mingxi was approached by a stranger who gave directions only to suddenly raise a gun at her. Yet at that critical moment, Zheng Tai rushed in to stop him, shouting for Mingxi to escape. In the desperate struggle, Zheng Tai was accidentally shot, his cries ringing out as their parents rushed over, finally seeing the truth of the father's cruelty. And his mother, broken and disappointed beyond repair, turned her back on him forever, while Zitai arrived too late, shoving past his father to carry his wounded brother to the hospital, leaving the betrayed parents behind, and Zheng Tai, in agony, shook off his father's hand, making the man realize he had truly lost everything. At the same time, Mingzhu awoke to find her sister gone, and hearing the chaos outside, thought of her grandmother and mother and decided to go home on foot, using a map. When Mingxi returned and learned her brother was missing, she and Zitai searched the forest, and at a fork in the path they agreed to split up, promising to return in 5 minutes. And before parting, Zitai entrusted her with their father's pocket watch, not knowing it would be the last time he saw her. As Mingzhu fled, gunfire erupted in the distance, and just then her sister appeared, pulling her aside to hide, while Zitai found the road ahead blocked and was suddenly arrested by patrolling soldiers. Facing the tightening net of soldiers, Mingxi told her brother to run home, but knowing the pain of losing their father, Mingzhu refused to leave her. Yet the situation left no choice, so she pressed the pocket watch into his hand, counted to 3, and pushed him to run while she stayed behind to draw the soldiers away. One soldier spotted the escaping Mingzhu, raised his gun, and as he aimed, Mingxi threw herself in front of him, taking the shot. Mingzhu froze in horror, and the soldier who fired urged him to flee, so he ran in tears, dropping the pocket watch his sister had given him. That soldier turned out to be someone Mingxi had once saved, and he, stricken with guilt, placed her belongings and the pocket watch back in her hands before leaving. Meanwhile, Zitai, beaten and bloodied after capture, was nearly executed on the spot when soldiers learned he was a Seoul University student. But another soldier recognized him and proved his identity, sparing his life. Mingxi, however, was not so lucky. She had given her life to save her brother. In her final moments, hearing that her brother was safe, she let go, leaving this world under the cries of night insects. After the riots, Zitai plastered missing person notices everywhere, never finding her, sinking into despair, even attempting to die before the waves threw him back to shore. Decades passed, and 40 years later, a grown Mingzhu visited him, opening the relics box to find a note in which Mingxi had begged Zitai not to follow her into death. He had never married because he knew in his heart he had only one wife, the woman bathed in the golden sunlight of that long ago afternoon, and that memory lit the darkness of his life until his very soul faded away.